Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Sunday Morning Coffee Podcast. I am, of course, your host, Scott Gardner. Thank you for joining me for another interesting conversation today. My guest is Laura Gabayan. She is a physician and author. She's written a book called Common Wisdom that explores everything to do with, well, wisdom. What are the 8 characteristics of wisdom? How many people did she speak to about the topic of wisdom? And well, in what is kind of a dumb question, how can we become more wise? A wide and varied conversation on a wide and varied topic. I hope you enjoy it. This is my conversation with Laura Gabayan. Before we get started with today's conversation, let me remind you of a few of the different ways that you can support the show if you enjoy our content. The easiest way is to visit patreon.com/smcpod. That's patreon.com/smcpod, where for as little as $4 a month, you can support the show and get early access to episodes, as well as supporters-only content. You can also make a one-time donation at buymeacoffee.com/smcpod. That's buymeacoffee.com/smcpod. And if you don't want to shell out a few bucks, I completely understand. You can do your part by subscribing, liking, commenting wherever you consume the Sunday Morning Coffee Podcast, as that helps us with the algorithm and it helps get the show out there to more eyeballs. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you watching. And now I know you're tired of me babbling on, so let's get on to our conversation for this Sunday morning. Laura Gabayan, very much looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me on the Sunday Morning Coffee Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So, same question I start every guest with. If you could just give me and the audience a little bit of a background on yourself and the path that your life took that led you to where you are now.
So I'm a physician. I'm a physician researcher. I did emergency medicine and then I did research. And I published a lot in academia, and then I developed health problems during it or towards the end of publications of stuff. And that I realized, wait a second, the people treating me were physicians, but they were so stuck to like a box of what we learned. And they weren't willing to think outside of it. So the people who did think outside were the wise. And then I looked into wisdom. And I realized that, wait a second, there's no objective way of understanding wisdom. It's really very anecdotal. It's very subjective. It's very famous people said it. Religions talk about it, but no one really knew. And so I was like, well, as a scientist, why don't I create the project to study wisdom and write a book about it?
And that's what exactly interested me in this conversation, because like you said, wisdom, you hear, oh, he's a wise old man. Like, what does that exactly mean? Did he say something smart once? Has he lived his life? And like you said, it's such a vague term to most of us that we kind of really don't know what it is. So how would you describe, if you could boil it down, how would you describe wisdom?
Well, it's funny because initially I had a definition of someone who makes the good decisions, gives sound advice, and no one really, and then based on literature, and that's how you do all studies, is you look at what's done before. And so they have published some work in geriatric psychology and sociology journals, and they have found that the wise have an inverse relationship with age. They're age 50s, 60s, and 70s. And that has no association with gender, race, or political affiliation. And the wise, outside of that, no tests and no questionnaire can really identify a wise person except another human. So all of that led me to say, okay, who do you know that is wise? And this is the definition. No one used the definition. No one. Everyone was like, oh, I went to college with this person, or oh, I I remember this person. They weren't friends, they weren't family. They were just random people recommended. And someone's like, well, how did you come up with the 60? And I'm like, well, I told every single person I knew, everyone, do you know someone wise? We posted it on social media. We put it on Nextdoor. It was just a campaign to get people who are wise.
And so, how many people? So, when you put that call out, how many suggestions did you get? And what was the process of weeding through all those suggestions to narrow it down to the people that are in the book, which
Well,
we will
first
get
of
to?
all, it's funny because I didn't get that many. We started off with a few, and then we asked them who did they recommend, and it kind of grew. And at that goes to show you that finding a wise person is not easy. And it's not, and I was not the one to say, oh, yeah, that person's wise and that person's not, because I'm a scientist. I can't do that. That would be bias.
Right.
And so I let the numbers, like if I hear the same things, then that tell me that's what it is. And so I did. I ended up hearing a lot of the same things actually after around 20 people that I talked to. But I was like, you know what? I really want to hear more. And so I interviewed 60.
And what was your genesis for your interest in the concept of wisdom? Is it something that you have pondered through the years? Was there something that triggered it?
What triggered it was that I felt like these are the people who think outside the box. And I have kind of been the opposite of that because I'm a physician, I'm a scientist, I'm kind of limited to what I learned and what I know. But yet I felt like, okay, who are these people? What does it mean? And what is, what is it all about? I didn't know. So wisdom was not something I knew anything about.
And that's a good point that you make, that what you learn as you go through your life, your career, your education, whatever, that we sort of get married to those ideas, and we are defensive when someone challenges those ideas sometimes, like, oh no, that's not what I know. And so how much of wisdom is that ability to, and that mindset to be willing to take challenges to your own ideas? It's got to be a huge part of it.
Yeah, so so I interviewed 60 people, and that's why my book is called Common Wisdom, because what was common amongst these people, right? And so I found these 8 traits or elements or characteristics, and I'll give you all of them: resilience, kindness, positivity, spirituality, humility, tolerance, creativity, and curiosity. And I definitely found that these people seemed like, oh, my ideas can change. And they're very open to ideas. And they were humble. I mean, the amount of accomplishments I saw was ridiculous. They were very humble and they're very tolerant. And they're very like, it'll work out, but no one knows better than no one knows better. I don't, and someone else doesn't. Let me listen to them. So being open to other ideas.
And that would all, just going through your list of what you said, they're all integral, but that would seem to be a non-negotiable aspect to wisdom, is that ability to take in different information, process it, weigh it against what you know, and to be able to change your mind. Like, that's pretty much got to be a prerequisite, right?
I agree. And unfortunately, it's kind of taken a backseat these days. People are very set in their ways and they have ideas and they're like, oh, I believe in this. And they kind of don't want to change it. And so, it was very interesting because these people were very very like moldable. They were easy to go with the flow.
Hmm. And invariably, like you said, we're in a time where that ability to take in other viewpoints becomes less and less. So, do you think, does that indicate that there is not a death of wisdom, but does that indicate in any way that there is, in this day and age, perhaps a lack of wisdom, or do you feel that way?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people I interviewed were like, thank you for doing this because we need it. And I feel like the internet, social media, whatever it is, will kind of lead you in the direction more so of what you want to look at,
Hmm.
and so that actually makes you less tolerant, less accepting of others. And so, in some way, there is a death of wisdom because first of all, the focus on social media and the focus on looking good and on glitz and glamour, and then the focus on things that don't matter
Mm.
and things that are superficial is the opposite of wisdom. So yes, I feel like there totally is.
And the focus on being right is everybody wants to be right these days.
And that goes into my well, it's a combination. There's a few chapters to talk about that, but being right is kind of like an ego. It's kind of like having pride.
Hmm.
And the people who have pride, I know, were not that extreme, but the people who had a lot of pride were someone like Adolf Hitler. He had a lot of pride. He thought he knew better than everyone else.
A lot of pride, a lot of ego, like you said,
Right.
and that is a bit of a, when someone challenges you, that first instinct for a lot of us is as a personal attack and as a wound to our ego, as whatever. When really, there's no reason why it should be taken that way, because the smartest people in the world change their minds.
I think it's actually good to change your mind. I think it's good to not take a stance. Some people think of it as not caring. That's not it. It's kind of being open to different ideas. And so I think it's good to be like, oh, wait, what? And it's okay to kind of explore. I mean, remember, I said creativity was one of the aspects. And I think that it's part of being curious and creative. It's both.
Do you feel that, because we often see certain things happen and then there's a backlash and it sort of self-corrects. Do you see any type of self-correction among us as a society, where maybe people are starting to push back against that kind of rigidity and that kind of, being in your own tribe instead of listening to a wide variety of viewpoints? Or are we doomed to continue this?
No, I definitely think it will self correct. I just wonder at what price. And so I know we're like our younger population is very lonely, is depressed. And so I mean it's depressing. I'm a very confident person and I'm very accomplished, but trying to get followers and all, it's depressing. And to think that these people have to do it at a young age, it's just all very depressing. And so I feel like at what price they will, but at what price?
Hmm. And to that point, I'm 54 years old next month. So I grew up in a completely different technological time
Same.
than is happening right now. And I remember as a teenager there being enough anxiety and enough
Enough.
loneliness and enough back then, let alone now you're on Instagram and you're scrolling through and there's all these gorgeous models or all these buff guys and you're like, oh shit, I'm nothing like that. I'm worthless. I'm this, I'm that. It must be an absolute nightmare for young people today.
I can't imagine if you feel like you're gaining any self-worth from that. I think it's just so sad. And I don't feel like someone in their 20s has the confidence and the wisdom and the sense of, oh, that does matter.
Hmm.
It's really sad.
Hmm.
So I really, I don't, I mean, yes, it will correct, but I agree with you. I grew up in a totally different time,
Mm-hmm.
and what I'm seeing now is really disgusting.
And just to sort of carry on that point, sometimes the adults that are meant to be providing those young people with the guidance and the wisdom that they need to get through this are caught up in it themselves. They're out there looking for, likes and followers, or posting pictures of their kids to get clout, let's call it. So, it's tough for everybody to navigate, because
I agree.
this technology has come around so quickly. How does any of us know how to deal with it?
Well, it's not only how do you know how to deal with it, but you're right. You have people who are navigating it, who are not wise, who are focusing on how they look, who care about so many things that don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's why you should buy my book. But I really feel like you should take a step back and think about what is important. But I'm not so sure that people really can do that.
Yeah, I'm not convinced either. I think that there will be a reckoning, but yeah, at the moment it's going to take a little bit of a little bit of prodding to get us there. But so let's go back to the story. Was it 9 characteristics of
Eight.
wisdom?
So
8.
there are 8 characteristics, and so in research, you either know or you have a hypothesis, and you kind of know what you're studying, or you totally don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, I kind of started with we have no idea, and so it's considered qualitative research. And so you start off with different. We start off with over 20 different themes or ideas or characteristics, and of those 20, we kind of collapse them into the 8. And so a few of them have like positivity, has gratitude as well. And that's because people talk about how important gratitude was to them. And so that went in. And but the 8 themes are very related. They're all like, I look at them and I'm like, oh my gosh, to be resilient, which is number 1, you have to be positive.
Right.
And so to be positive, you have to have a sense of kindness. To be spiritual, I think you need to be humble. You need to be a lot of things. And to be, it just, everything is connected.
Mm-hmm. So, did you have those 8 characteristics mapped out before you started the interviews, or did they come about as you discovered common threads between all the people that you talked with?
Yeah, so I didn't, and many people said, which one surprised you, and I definitely feel like kindness surprised me the most, but I did not. And as a scientist, I kind of approach this as a blank slate, like
Mm-hmm.
having no idea what would be in there. And it was very fascinating to see resilience as number 1, because it's true. Most of the people I talked to, most had overcome a big obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, we all know what, something teaches you a lesson, whether you like it or not, it does. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, for example, I had no idea kindness, as I said, was so important. And I'm Middle Eastern, and in the Middle East, kindness is definitely not something that is talked about or promoted. And that I had no idea that would be one of them.
Hmm. You mentioned that you can start either with a blank slate on a research project like this, or you can go in with some information already. Do you have a preference? Do you like going into a topic completely in the dark and it starts opening it up for you and you get that aha moment? Or do you prefer having a little, just a little bit of something going into it?
So there's 2 kinds of research. There's qualitative, which is the one I told you. That's the foundation. That's the one I did for this. And quantitative, that's the numbers. And what I know you mentioned preference, but I was just used to publishing quantitative data. That's looking at the numbers, looking at thousands upon millions of people, and so that's different. And that's because, it was something I was used to, and that's what I did. Qualitative research, I was not used to doing. I had published one paper that was qualitative once before. So do I have a preference? I mean, I would probably say the other because that's what I'm used to doing.
Right, right, which
And
makes
it's
perfect
more
sense.
methodical, it's more concrete, it looks at numbers, it's not as messy. And it's kind of like, oh, you find a relationship between this and that, and numbers tell you the story. This is different, it's more messy.
Hmm. I just wanted to touch a little bit again on some of those characteristics of wisdom that you mentioned, because I'm a reader of Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosophy. And just as you were talking and mentioning some of those characteristics, it just like, yep, 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 right about. And his big thing was, gratitude, resilience, because he went through numerous deaths and illnesses and this and that, and being at peace with what you can't control. So a lot of that seems to be very much what you are talking about here.
Oh, it's funny because in my spirituality chapter, I don't know if it's in that chapter, but I really talk about something called the spiritual surrender. And in my book, I really personally I had a hard time understanding that because surrender means give up. But I think an idea is okay, step aside. There's a bigger entity, and step aside and let that entity do its job. And so surrender to that bigger entity. We don't know what it is, but surrender. And so I think and that's the foundation, I feel like, of a lot of it. It's understanding that.
And is that what I've also been interested in and looking into and talking to people about psychedelic medicine. And one of the big talking points in that is the ego death, where you sort of let go of, you know, like you said, not give up, but you kind of give yourself up to the idea that, maybe your ego is getting in your own way, and there's a lot of things. Is that kind of the same thing as what you're talking about?
It's still hard to understand. It takes many years, but I think, like, for example, my editor or my publisher, when I wrote Spiritual Surrender, she had a hard time understanding it because she was like, wait, that doesn't make sense, whatever. I'm like, no, it took me years to understand this. And yes, that is what I'm talking about. I think it's the idea of letting go of your own ego, being humble, and realizing there is something bigger. It doesn't mean not doing everything you still can. Continue to do what you physically can, but realizing I have help.
Hmm. And it's that, again, that's such the first step to everything.
Yeah.
If you struggle with addiction, the first step is, going to that place where you can admit it to yourself. And, you know, so yeah, I agree with you that I think that's really, if you want to achieve wisdom, that's kind of got to be where you got to start, is letting go of your own biases and thoughts that are locked into your head for God knows how long. I know I have thoughts in my head that are, like I said, I'm 50 plus years old, that have been there forever, that I'm still trying to get to dispel and change.
But it's funny you mentioned achieve wisdom, and I feel like what I found and the 8 elements kind of make it more palatable. Like you can say to yourself, I'm good at this, but I'm not good at that. And by breaking it down, like for example, I didn't grow up with kindness, and that was not important to me growing up. I was not a mean person, but it just wasn't important. My husband, on the other hand, that's kind of what dominates his life, is being kind.
Mm.
So I think it's just when you look at those eight, you're like, oh, I'm good at this or I'm not good at that. Let me make this better or bigger, or let me focus on
One of the things that I've thought about a lot is this idea of happiness. And happiness seems to me to be such a vague, kind of like wisdom in a way. It's like, are you happy? Well, what the hell does that mean? Like, am I happy? Right now, yeah. Tomorrow, maybe I get a flat on the way to work. Happiness to me seems to be almost, I'm not sure how to put it, but it almost seems to be that ego thing, is that we want to be happy. Whereas I'm not sure what we should be striving for, but I think it should be something different. What are your thoughts on that idea of striving for happiness?
that. I think happiness is part of achieving wisdom. I definitely feel like happiness is more superficial and
That's
it's
probably the
more
word I was looking for.
temporary. It's kind of dependent on the situation, whereas wisdom seems deeper and it seems more meaningful and more, having more depth in your life. And so while happiness is important, we don't, I think having understanding what will bring you wisdom and meaning and depth in life will give you that happiness.
Right, right. Let's talk a little bit about the people that you spoke to. So you mentioned that there were some common threads, like adversity, that the people that you talked to went through. Did those people that went through, because all adversity is different, obviously, people are going to react to it differently. Was there a commonality in the way that those people that you talked to dealt with the different adversities that they dealt with, or was there just a wide and varied approach to it?
It definitely was a sense that the adversity, whether you like it or not, whether you're happy about it or not, whether it's emotionally difficult or not, led to them being stronger and them kind of learning something. So at the end of the day, the adversity served as their teacher, a gift in a way. So and I talk about it in my book. It's not, the idea of things happen for you and not to you. And the idea is that, okay, this is happening, this sucks, but I will become a better person at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I definitely saw that. I saw that sense of I am a more resolved, understood, educated person.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say, 60 people, it wasn't easy to get these 60. It's not, people underestimate it. I'm like, no, it's not. And I thought about it. Even my editor and my publisher, both two different people, said, "Oh, would we be able to find the results if we interviewed 6,000 people?" I'm like, you would never find 6,000 wise adults. I'm like, maybe 600, but not really. And so I just don't think you'll find that ever.
So I'm very lucky that I grew up in a very loving household, not physically demonstrative but just the way I was brought up and so on. And I guess I was lucky, let's put it in quotes, to not have huge adversity in my life. Yes, I lost both my parents years and years ago. I've had breakups, a divorce, etc. I almost feel, because of the things that you are saying and other stories that I hear, there's almost this part of me that's like, damn, I wish I would have gone through, not anything like, super horrible, but just something to maybe strengthen my steel inside a little bit. Do you find is that a common?
It's funny because, look, of the eight elements, the one thing you can't control is what happens. challenges in your life, right? And that's the part that brings you resilience. But I do think what you can't control is the sense of learning more about it. And whether you don't, some people may need that to happen, but some may not. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can fall into the category of you don't need that to happen. You are interested in learning about it, but you don't need a huge catastrophe to happen for you to learn that this is what it is.
Mm-hmm. And you can also learn from others, like, kind of like what you're doing by talking to all those people. And through my current job, I work with a palliative care organization. So I've spoken to a fair number of people that have a loved one dealing with an end of life illness, or with the people themselves. You could learn quite a bit about resilience from people that are going through that kind of thing. When you see how bravely they are facing their own challenges, it makes you think, Jesus, I want to take that in and put that to use.
I think when you look at the resilient chapter, you're kind of like, wow, I thought I had it bad. You have no idea what people have gone through and
Mm-hmm.
how they've overcome it in a positive light. And so I think it's an idea of I can get through it.
Now, as a scientist, of course, like you mentioned at the outset, you're talking to a wide range of people, has nothing to do with race, gender, etc. So, how varied are the people that you talk to? Like, did you have CEOs of companies, and then the guy that works as a laborer? Was it that wide ranging that you have different, social, let's say, social status,
Yeah, and
etc.?
it's funny. I had one of my interviewees was the CEO of 5 companies. Five. And he has also served as an advisor for, I don't know, the last 5 presidents in both sides. And
Mm-hmm.
currently is an advisor to the Pope. And was another, I think I talk about him in my humility chapter. And another person is a librarian. And so I think it's important to realize, wisdom really has no association with accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, or wealth. It really is a sense of being, is a sense of like, I am content and I am happy and I have a meaningful life.
And of the people that you talked to, was there a common thread in terms of their, let's say, their upbringing? Maybe they had parents that were wise, or an uncle or grandfather, grandmother, or was it again just all over the map?
I think it was all over the map, and I wouldn't say that it was something that the only thing I noticed was who they were. They were. It's funny because the common threads were what I noted in my book, and it definitely was interesting that they all sounded similar. Now, yet they had no idea who the other person was. They had no relationship, and they were all so kind of content, like it'll be okay.
Mhm. Now we have stereotypical imagery and thoughts that we go to when we talk about wisdom or being wise. For example, the wise old owl. Okay, we always hear that, the owl with the big eyes and the graduation cap on the top of his head. Why is the owl, or is there any research, or does anybody know why the owl became that
I
symbol?
don't know, and I should look at that. In my book, there's the light bulb because it's the idea of, oh, you have an aha moment, and in a light bulb, it's kind of like it's in your brain how you perceive your life. I don't know about the owl, and I should look into that. No, I don't know.
It just came to me. I was wondering why, is it the big eyes? Is it because they're, so stealthy at night when they fly? I don't know. It's interesting, but yeah, just thought off the top of my head there.
I agree.
And again, the other image we have of wisdom again is the wise old fella in his rocking chair, sitting out imparting wisdom. And again, I guess that's part of the whole thing of we associate you get older, you get wiser, which I think there is a degree of truth to for some people, but not for everyone.
And it's funny because age does not mean wisdom per se, right? And so I mean, as I said, they did find wisdom is associated with ages 50, 60, and 70. So we only interviewed the 60 people were only age 50 to 79. And the reason is because once you're in your 80s or 90s, you're not as open to other ideas.
Right.
And so but wisdom is not just being older, or else we would have just interviewed them. And it's not just being smarter either. A lot of people mistake being wise with being intelligent. And I'm like, no, we all know people who are intelligent. We know people who study a lot and they don't necessarily make good decisions. They may be curious. I mean, that was one they ate, but they are not necessarily wise.
So yeah, I definitely agree that age doesn't equal wisdom. How much does life experience as opposed to age? If you're 40, 50 years old and you've been through things and you've learned a lot, that is obviously going to be more of a prerequisite for wisdom than just being 70 years old.
I agree, and I think that's why resilience was the first one, is because it's really leads to you having had encountered situations and that led to you being wiser. And so that's a life experience that you wouldn't have encountered when you're in your 20s or 30s. And so yes, I feel like experience definitely adds, but there's people who have experiences real them who don't do well with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I feel like it was a sense of not only having had the experience, but it was how they dealt with it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that really interested me about this conversation is just the fact that it is such a wide ranging, like if you want to get healthy, do this, and this, there's a lot to that as well. But, it's kind of not such an esoteric topic as wisdom. It's just like intelligence and smarts. Yeah, you can be book smart, but it doesn't necessarily mean, you're going to get out in the world and be life smart or street smart or whatever. And so I think what you're saying is the same thing. You can be incredibly smart, but not wise.
Right.
So it's just all the variables that sort of go into it is fascinating to me. Is that kind of what fascinated you about the whole topic?
Well, no, I told you what the reason I pursued it was because I encountered my own issues. And
Right.
then in a way, I felt like being a physician was a curse, which I am. And it was kind of like, wait, no, we learned this in medical school. As someone said, being a physician is like a disease. It's like you can't get rid of it because you stick to wherever you learn. And the only people who did kind of were open to ideas and did think outside the box, I thought were the wise. And that's why I pursued this whole project. Because no, had I known this is something I wanted to do before? No. And someone I remember said to me after I read this book, have you thought about your next book? I'm like, that's not my purpose. My purpose is not to be an author and write books.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not. I did a project. I had a lot of interest in it. It was really to tell the world what I found. That's it.
I want to talk a little bit about the medical community, physicians, and so on, in kind of a little bit of an outside of the topic kind of way. So during COVID, we had obviously all that mess, and then the vaccines, and then, we had the anti-vaxxers, we had the pro-vaxxers, blah, blah, blah. And of course, like everything else, as time goes on, the facts start to come out. And do you feel that there was this two-part question? Do you feel that there was a hesitancy in the medical community, among doctors especially, to um, to at least acknowledge the questioning of the vaccine when it came out? And was that a wisdom thing, or was that maybe a courage thing? What do you think was going on there, and was there any correlation in any of that to what you and I are discussing now?
Well, I think the problem with the vaccine and COVID was that people, like, even before it came out, I assumed that it's going to be the holy grail. I assumed it's going to solve all our problems. And because I have vaccinated all our kids, we have eradicated many diseases, and I thought, okay, like smallpox, it's going to do that. It's going to get rid of it. You know, but in my opinion, no, it was not worth it. But I feel like physicians were afraid. I feel like it was a fear thing. And that's why I say live in faith and not fear. And I feel like they were afraid that if they questioned it, then they become an anti-vaxxer. They're questioning vaccines overall. And I'm like, no, I questioned it, but I believe in vaccines. So it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. I believe in that. It makes sense to me to vaccinate, but not with COVID.
Yeah.
I did receive the vaccine for COVID, but the more I looked at the literature and the more I looked at the results, it wasn't worth it.
Mm-hmm. So, again, you talk about faith and spirituality and so on. In terms of wisdom, is there a courage involved in wisdom as well?
Yeah, and I definitely feel like it's part of living in faith and not fear, and living that everything will be okay, and not being afraid of the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And even if something bad happens, you'll tackle it and you'll figure it out, but not being afraid of it.
Mm-hmm. And again, that goes back to the question I just asked about, physicians and vaccines, because you can absolutely understand at that time, like I got double vaccinated. I haven't got any boosters. I was skeptical because I thought there's no way that this has been tested the way it should be or could be. That's neither here nor there, though. But you can understand when people's livelihoods are being threatened, if they speak out about this stuff. So, the people to me that have spoken out about that takes a lot of courage, which to me sort of goes back and as you said, how much interconnects when it comes to wisdom. I see a lot of connections in there as well. But at the same time, those that didn't speak up doesn't mean they're not wise, because I can completely understand them not wanting to put their head above the parapet as well.
I think it's the whole idea of being a physician. You are kind of you're kind of limited to thinking a certain way, and you're kind of limited to looking at things a certain way. You're the ultimate scientist slash. I mean, I didn't believe in spirituality before, and because they don't believe that there is something bigger, and now I do, and I have because because not only because I wrote the book and I did the research, but in general I do. But 20 years ago, no. And so I think with vaccinations, the same idea exists. They really were afraid of falling into a box and
Mm-hmm.
of questioning X, which is a wisdom thing, being curious,
Mm-hmm.
questioning it. And I feel like everything should be questioned, not
Mm-hmm.
just and especially something that was created so quickly, but after it came out, something that can have such effects.
For sure. So spirituality is an interesting topic for me. And you mentioned, the people that you talk to.
That was my fourth element.
Your fourth element, spirituality. Um, I I have changed my tune on that. Um, I was for the longest time an atheist. Didn't I was against organized religion. Um, but I changed my tune on that. I'm still not a religious person. I don't go to church, but I think there's a fundamental with the decline in religion. I think there's a fundamental loss of uh, community because people go to the same building every Sunday. They say this, see their friends. They have a cup of tea. They chit chat. Even if it's not about the religion aspect for you, that kind of community, and hey, if I need something, that community is going to be there for me. Do you feel that, even religion aside, do you feel that the loss of spirituality in our society is leading to more bricks crumbling in that society, or how do you
Well,
see
I
that?
think, yeah, so a few things. I mean, I definitely feel like spirituality and religion are not the same.
Right, and people
And some people
confuse them.
associate the two with one another, but they are not. And so I think they help. It helps to be, religious, and it can help in spirituality, but it's not the same. I definitely feel like we talked about a crumbling of wisdom, and one of my interviewees, he was like, I feel like a lot of what you found are things we find in church. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
idea is that, yes, there is that sense of community also, but it's also a sense of other things that you get out of being in a church, or anywhere that is bigger, or
Mm-hmm.
having that sense. And so I think it's all part of the crumbling of
Mm-hmm.
not having that faith.
And not to mention the crumbling of the family unit that we have seen so many single parent households. Families don't eat at the dinner table together. That's one of my memories from my childhood is just my dad getting home from work at 5 o'clock, sitting down with him and my mom having dinner, watching the news or whatever. And at the time, it seems like nothing. But now that I'm in my 50s, it's like, if we're losing religion, spirituality, community, and now we're losing the family unit, what is there left? There's
That's
individuality
why
left.
there's a higher rate of depression and
Mm-hmm.
loneliness. And that's why, I just, like, for example, in my spirituality chapter, I talk about the 5 blue zones, where they have the highest living whatever, 100 people, 100 and over, gentenarians, and what a big theme that these people have in common is community, is a sense of having that personal relationship. And I yeah, we kind of, with the internet, with everything, we've kind of lost it. And I do think the family unit helps. I do think all of that helped, but we're losing it. And that's probably why it's less focused on wisdom.
We're losing it all at the same time too, which
Yeah, but it will bounce back.
it will. It
We
will.
have to have faith. It will bounce back, but I don't know. As I said, at what price?
Getting back to the book, when you're speaking to all of these people from varied walks of life, what was the first thing that you kind of went, oh, they're all saying the same things? Like they obviously didn't say exactly the same thing, but you know what I mean? The first thing that there was a thread through each of them that you said, oh, okay, I see the connection here. Was there something that jumped out?
I don't think so. I think what it was is so if you look at my 10 questions, I don't have them with me, that I asked every single one. the first question kind of asks them about who they are and their life, and if they could tell me about it, because I want to know who I was talking to, or was it the first or the second question? I don't know. And no, I think what really jumped out was the amount of trauma that they had gone through and how it had made them stronger. You know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger was true.
It's interesting. Was there anyone or anything that really jumped out at you, that surprised you, that you maybe had an inkling of, but that brought it to light? Anything like that that really sort of popped out?
There wasn't one. I have to say though, I was really surprised overall at having gone through so much trauma and yet being so content and positive and being like, oh wow, it was horrible. And it's funny because I thought, okay, well maybe it didn't hit them as much as, but it did. I mean, the people who nominated other people knew them through those traumas. So it did. It's just, I think they were kind of like, I had one woman who lost 2 husbands. And she goes, you can't control whether when you're born and when you die. All you can do is laugh. And she was right. Then, laughter was a big theme under positivity, my third element. And it's true. I definitely found, I had one guy who was raised by alcoholic parents who were laughing all the time. And he laughed, he was like that, he assumed laughter was something he had because of his parents.
Right.
But no. No, we're seeing the laughter is a big theme. We're seeing the laughter is something kind of weaving in to what people talk about. So it was fascinating.
Is trauma, is it as simple as, I'm going to change my question because I know it's not as simple as, but it seems like a huge thing of overcoming trauma and moving past it is just the idea of almost like, well, I survived that shit. If I can survive, I've dealt with that. It was bad. I made it out the other side. Let's go. Is it as simple as that, or?
No, I think it's just like, for example, I have chronic Lyme disease, and that's what caused me to kind of go down this route. And I can't really walk. And I think I tell my kids, oh, I can't walk. And I'm like, but I was meant to have this so I could write this book. They're like, no, you were not, Mom. You don't go. You can't even walk. You can't walk outside. You don't take us anything where you weren't. I'm like, they don't understand that. So I feel like it's a sense of, that happened. It's bad. It was bad. It was emotionally difficult. And what have I learned from it? So, and it is a sense of, oh, I overcame it. What's next? But I definitely feel like it's kind of it gives people an aha moment too. So it's not just about, it definitely gives you a sense of, I can do it. I'm a warrior and not a victim. But it's also of what did this teach me?
And I guess that all comes with age because, or a lot of that can come with age because, you're a teenager in high school and your boyfriend, girlfriend dumps you and it's the worst thing in the world and you're never going to be the same again. But again, you get through it and, you learn from even that kind of thing that you go through as a young person. And that sort of builds up that, little bit of resilience at least.
I definitely feel like the younger generation has the best. I mean, it's not just, you're right, it's not just those emotions of how to deal with difficulties, but they, on top of that, have the internet. So, yeah, you're right. And And that when they're younger, things are different and things
Hmm.
are a bigger deal.
Yeah, everything's a huge deal when you're 15, 16. So before we wrap this up, it's been fascinating. Talk a little bit about the book. When did you start the research for it?
Well,
When?
I started reading about the background of who's wise, what's out there, what's been done about this in during COVID.
Mhm.
and and then I started interviewing people in 2022. And to do that, I had a research assistant and a marketing specialist kind of post it everywhere for me, and we created a website. We told everyone about it, and so then I interviewed the 60 people, and then I wrote it last year, and this year it came out, and it's called Common Wisdom. Common because of what I said. It's what they had in common. And
Mhm.
actually, they're actually common people. They're not some famous person or a celebrity. And so it's on Amazon. And Common Wisdom is on Amazon. And it's very, very to the point because I'm a scientist and I don't believe in writing long. I'm not a writer. I don't write a paragraph about something. I write, a sentence, and I
Yeah.
get my point across.
Well, if you want to read flowery, go read poetry, right? If you want just the information.
Well, it's not. It's funny because it's not just the information about these people, but there are thoughts in there that are important to understand too.
Mhm.
Like as I said, the blue zone, the spiritual surrender, or different things. So
So if there's someone out there that's watching this and really very interested and want to sort of, I don't even know how to improve their own wisdom. That sounds wrong, but you know what I'm saying. Where would you have someone? What would be the first step for someone that is looking to acquire wisdom, for lack of a better word?
I think it's hard to say, okay, well, I'm gonna acquire it by reading this book. I think
Right.
it's the idea is, okay, how do I find more meaning in my life? How do I feel more fulfilled? And so this book will help and identifying those 8 elements, and like I said, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and the way you get the book is on Amazon, and Amazon has it on softcover, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook as
Oh,
well.
perfect. Perfect. So many
Yes,
different ways to consume the book for your audiobook people out there. That's awesome. So along with it being available on Amazon, is there a website, a social media that you would like to point?
I have a website. It's called, lauragabayan.com. And it explains the process. It's a little bit more about me. It's great, but I understand a lot of people may have a hard time remembering it. So lauragabayan.com.
All right, I will put it. I put everybody's website and links in the description for the episode, so I will do the same for you as well, of course. Laura, this has been an amazing, just scratch the surface kind of conversation into wisdom, but
It's good talking to you.
yeah, I've loved it. I appreciate your time, and I'll send you the link on Sunday when the episode comes out.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Laura, for your time.
Bye. Good to
Bye.
see you. Thank
Good to
you.
see you. Bye bye.